Okay, thank you all for attending, especially on this very cold day. Anyway, welcome to the forum. This is the second forum we've had, and I don't know whether any of you were present at the first one, so we'll still go over all the things we discussed then and bring you up to date what's happened and what findings we've come. So, to start with, I suppose I declare this forum open for the purposes of this is a forum, it's not a town meeting, so no issues or anything discussed requires a vote today. We just want to solicit ideas and comments on some of our findings. So I'll just run through the agenda. Each of the committee members and special advisors will identify and be introduced. I'm Robin Etheridge, chairman of the group, but I live on the Lower Green. Then we will go through background to what the brief we were given and charged by the Board of Selectmen, the history of the Green, just to give some historical context, which Jan will comment on. We'll go through the findings and the preliminary list, which was garnered from all the outreach we did, the last forum, discussions with various experts, which brings us up to date, which there should be a copy available for distribution. And also what we've done as regards advising the selectmen at a preliminary stage, and then open to any further discussions, ideas you have. Okay, so over to the committee. Who wants to start?
Tony Matthews.
Fred Thurlow.
Amelia Random.
Janice Forrest.
And I'm Tim Lamprey, the tree warden for the town of Newbury.
Right, good. Right, okay, so the background, the selectmen created this group as a forum to seek community input on how to improve the Upper Green. It's long overdue, and we've appreciated all the comments on that, and we've in pretty good state to come up with a plan. And so how we did this was through outreach to all the individuals who attended meetings, discussions, as I said, and solicited advice from our special advisors. The next thing to do is we present to the selectmen our list, which we shall do shortly after this meeting. The timeline was to be completed by the first quarter. These are all the discussion points. The plan, as you'll see from the proposed list, is clearly this will have an effect over the next few years, because you can't just deal with all the trees in 1 year. So it's a progress over time. They have to be inspected, looked at, and adjusted accordingly. The budget issue is something we haven't discussed, other than we know that there is a gift that's been allocated to the Upper Green by a donor, and that money we have, which is a substantial amount, goes a long way to accomplish a lot of the things we're going to discuss today. Also, there is an allocation in the town budget for tree work anyway, slightly smaller. So with that, let's just start on the history of the Green. Jan.
The traditional use of the Upper Green began with a plan in 1642 during a town meeting to move the settlement further from the banks of the Parker River. The Green was established as a shared pasture and green gathering place. It is viewed as the heart of Old Town. When the town was first incorporated in 1635, the first settlement was located at the mouth of the Parker River around the Lower Green. The Upper Green, originally known as the Traying Green, is a triangular plot laid out to serve as a shared pasture. During the Revolutionary War, the green was used by Benedict Arnold for troops, and we would like to restore it to its beauty that it should have. And as I have before, I would also like to thank young Keith Cole Abloh and his friends for getting the green back in everybody's attention. So thank you all for coming and supporting this really great reason to try to get the green back up and running the way it should be.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so after our last meeting, we initially sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen, which was before Christmas, it was in early November, to start get certain necessary things, actions taking place before winter set in and making it impossible to do stuff. Now, as we understand, is there were certain delays in getting this through, and there were priorities on other parts of Newbury with fallen trees, all sorts of things that pushed our request back. So at the moment, nothing's been done in terms of inspecting the trees and dealing with any limbs that need to be taken off. Winter then sets in, but now we're ready to go again properly this year. Next we should turn to the actual list of all the items gleaned from yourselves and all other interested parties over the last few months. And what I thought we'd do is we'll go through them all with you, and if you've got them all there, for you to openly say whether you agree or not with any of them, or want to add, subtract, or whatever.
And does anyone need a copy? Because I've got a bunch right here.
It is not an exhaustive list, but we've pretty well covered everything that was discussed.
Copy. Yes. Okay, hurry up.
What it does, it starts off, we've got to have an inspection of all the properties. There's a process in dealing with trees on public property. There has to be hearings. Tim can amply explain exactly what it is. So before we really can do anything, that has to be the start point on dealing with the tree side of things. We'll cover things like the pond and everything else separately, but if we start with trees. So, and we put a selection up on the board there of the replacement trees or things we're looking at, which is open to everyone to comment on. I thought they were a pretty good representation of indigenous species, which would go well in our soil and climate and everything else.
Yeah, Tim had weighed in on which ones would be native trees that would work well for the upper green.
Okay. So, any sort of thoughts on that one? We had a fairly long list beforehand, of which some were not indigenous, and indeed some were invasive, I think, which we sort of discarded, but those seem pretty good. If you want to see what's actually on the green, the map identifies, which we can share around, exactly what's on the green right now and what type of tree species it is. Yeah, that one there. So you know, they tend mostly to be maples and a couple of linden.
Do you have a proposed planting map too, or how's that?
Not yet.
Okay.
That depends, good question, that depends on the tree warden's assessment of the tree itself.
Okay.
But one of the things you'll see down there is the proposal is to remove all the stumps, and there are loads of stumps there as well, and then start new trees in there. And I think when we discussed this, the idea was in certain places, the soil, the light and everything might determine what type of tree.
Exactly. I mean, part of what it is, okay, the first thing is, the trees on the upper green and the lower green, for that matter, have not been maintained for many, many years. So we don't really know without getting a bucket truck in there to look at the trees. In some cases, there's branches that are that long coming off the trunk, something about that big. And that's from when a branch broke and somebody just came along and cut that off, and that was the extent of how that was taken care of. So we don't know, is there issues with, let's say the tree looks good, but the entire inside of the tree is hollow, and if that's the case, then that tree should probably come down. Now, depending on what trees come out in what spots, you can plant another tree, say, in between two others, but ultimately looking at it and saying, okay, how big is a particular tree going to get to fit into a particular spot? So if something's going to be 60 feet tall and 40 feet wide, you don't want to put it in between two trees that are 20 feet wide, because they're just going to be battling each other for food, nutrients, and sunlight. So that will be the determination, and trying to put of the list of the trees that are there, different ones in there, because I think as everybody remembers, whether it's Dutch elm disease that took out the elm trees, or now emerald ash borer taking out the ash trees, if you just have one specific species of trees, then there's going to be problems with just making it easier for some kind of, call it pest, to get in there. So the first thing to do is to go through, start examining the trees, cut out whatever dead wood is in the trees, then allow us to make a determination of, okay, which trees are the ones that should come down. Once that determination is made, then there'll be a public hearing on the removal of the very specific trees. Until we know exactly which trees are coming down in which locations, that will be the determination of what's going to happen on that. We'll do apart from what's going on here with the upper green, there'll be the same type of analysis on the lower green at the same time, so that at least we get ahead on the lower green, knowing, okay, it appears to be mostly white pine, have they reached their age? In a lot of cases, some trees, that's what happens. They just age out, they get too old, and their lifespan is used up. So that's what we're going to start doing, is just make sure we get the trees pruned up, get the dead wood out of there, so there's less danger of branches falling off the trees. Once we start cleaning up things, then we'll have a better idea of what is going to happen with particular trees, as far as, okay, this one just needs to be pruned up a little more, this one needs this one needs that. So that's what we want to do on that end, and then decide which trees, if any, need to come out at this point. And then if we grind out the stumps and look and say, okay, we've got these trees over here, we've got a big space here, we can replant another tree in here, and just go along and start replacing trees along the green that will be appropriate for the growing conditions where the tree would go in. And also, you don't want to put something that's going to wind up, growing in there where the baseball diamond is, or, shedding leaves into the pond all the time, and, all the different things that have to be taken into consideration. So that's still fluid at this point in time, which trees are going to go where.
Mr. Chairman, if I might?
Yes.
I know Tim has talked about this, he's just forgotten to mention it, but the trees are going to be set in further into the park to avoid salt damage from the highway, right?
Right. That's
Leaving the roads, yeah.
That's been the issue with so many of the trees around, is that they just, well, you look at, like the sugar maples, they don't take well to road salt, and a lot of the trees that you see around dying are the ones that, the salts damage the root system of the trees, so there would be that offset. again, depending on how big the tree's gonna get, will be a determination on how far it might have to be bumped in off. Especially like on the Green Street side, if you look there, the trees all seem to be relatively in a straight line, but most of them are fairly close to the road, so if they're pulled back a little bit more, then less likely that there's gonna be damage to them in the future, whether it's cars or anything, so, yeah.
Okay, and you're happy with the selection of the trees we've narrowed down?
Yeah, I think all of these are trees that, will do well. They are all, call it native. I mean, a lot of trees get planted that aren't native. Some of them do very well around here. But I think the whole charge for the town was to use native species wherever we could in situations to replace what might be, even though there's a particular variety of tree around, it may not be a native.
Okay, I'm carrying on the theme of trees. We have the two evergreens in the middle, which came in for some debate. And one of them's not in good condition at all, and the other's leaning over and growing peculiarly anyway. So the suggestion was they're both removed. Now, this is slightly controversial because they are the Christmas tree, or used as the Christmas tree in the middle, if you remember. So the suggestion is we replace it with a single tree that is more Christmas tree-like, I suppose, of which there are a couple of species. It's either do that or wait till one of them falls down and the other one follows suit fairly shortly after, because they have an indeterminate life. They have a determinate life.
There was some question about one of them being donated,
Yes.
and that was the question, and I don't think anybody had the answer to that, and maybe either the people who are here might know, or anybody who winds up watching this on cable might know.
Well, don't be shy.
Well,
Stick
I
your
had
hand
said at
up.
the
It's-
last meeting, I'm Wilma Cunningham Buckley.
Right.
I said at the last meeting, or the first meeting, that if I understood it right, my father Dick Cunningham told my husband that he had planted a couple trees in memory of my mother.
Right.
She was not a native of Newbury, but my father was.
And we should certainly respect all of that.
But I don't know which trees.
Okay.
That's the problem, and nobody else seems to know either, so I mean, if they're
Where's
dying, they're dying,
Right.
you know.
Okay.
That's what
And,
happens.
Yes, I mean.
Nobody in my family
Huh.
seems to remember this, except,
But it was a Christmas tree, not a.
I don't know what
Oh,
kind
it
of
could be
tree
any.
it was. Could have been any.
So the big question is,
Yeah.
would you have an objection if it came down?
Oh, no, if it comes down, it
Right.
comes down. It's just that if it can be preserved.
Right. Well,
But
that's
since we don't know what trees it are, they are,
the
you know.
inspection will determine exactly what has to happen. So we've, in the worst case, we've just said, well, it's one of them is pretty well gone,
I see, yeah, that
Yeah.
one is.
and it will just fall down otherwise. So.
Can you tell the age of the trees?
It's difficult, because in some cases, you can look at the tree, you can look at the size of the trunk, but depending on growing conditions, that does not necessarily mean that in some years, some grew better than others. If they grew at a consistent rate of an inch in diameter every year, and it was a 36-inch diameter, then you could say it was a 36-year-old tree. Doesn't work that way.
Well, I know
So-
what my father planted. My mother died 13 years ago in December. So they would be, well, maybe
Yeah.
11, I'm not sure.
So that would tend to be some of the smaller trees that would be there. And who knows, it might have been some of the trees that were damaged to whatever point, and they had already been cut down, so to speak. I mean, there's really no way to know.
One there, right by the green, that all came down.
Yeah.
The road salt just.
That sounds pretty close to the age of that smallest evergreen. No, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
because they put out their main branches every year, the evergreens, and you can kind of count the layers. It's
Just
about
see.
the height of that tree.
Yeah, and I doubt it would be any of the ones that, call it the maples or whatever, along Green Street,
No.
because those are huge trees, and they would not have gotten to that size in 15 years. Well, again, it's difficult to know, but it's just
Is a leaning one.
trying to get things, I mean, there's one there that is growing at such an extreme angle, all it's going to take is one ice storm to, pull it up out of the ground, so that's the hard judgment, but you also don't want to take and cut down trees that were planted in memory of someone. If there's a way of saving
You don't
it.
need to, but
Yeah.
if you do, you do. I don't have a problem with that.
If we have any way of finding out which trees anybody contributed, then we'd certainly we have no objection, and we kind of talked about it before, if we can say that we now replaced the tree that was planted by Joe Smith for his family with this tree, and make sure that people know that, that it wasn't done just to get rid of the trees. We're not planning on mowing down all the trees like was suggested before, and Tim is going to inspect and check things and take down what needs to be and leave what can be that doesn't pose any other problems at this point. We're not going to clear cut, so, yeah. If we can find it in the record somewhere or whatever, then we'll be happy to, let people know it's a replacement for, Joe Smith's family's tree or whatever, so that they don't feel that they were slighted in any way with the loss of a tree. Well, people get attached to things, and you don't want to hurt. If they try to do something nice, we would like to keep that going. So, it is the town green, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
While we're on the subject, we had a fairly lively, not lively, but we had a good discussion here on the board as to what size trees we would use to replace these. And maybe we should throw this out to the public out there as to what we kind of figured on and why we came
Sure.
to that conclusion. We could plant large trees, which would be expensive to buy and hard to maintain. Or we could buy, I won't call them small, but medium, I guess you call them medium-sized trees, which is a standard for what they use in street trees, which is, they call it 3 to 5 inch caliper tree at 4 or 4 foot height, which is not a large tree, but they have a good record of surviving. And knowing the past maintenance of the green, we kind of felt that we were better off to go with that. We felt that they might not get the attention that they should get. Does anybody have any comment about that?
Yeah, Fred, my comment would be, I wouldn't rule out larger trees, and maybe you want to plant 2 or 3 very expensive ones and 8 or 10 smaller ones. So I don't know if you want to limit yourself, I'd keep your options open, rather than saying all of them should be 3 to 4 inch or 3 to 5 inch. Rather than saying, hey, let's have 1 or 2 really spectacular trees that cost $2,000 each or something, and that would be my comment.
Probably more money than that, planted up, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the tree. I mean, you can get bigger trees. In many cases, the larger sized trees are becoming available again. If you go back to, we had the recession in 2007, a lot of the growers would plant 1,000 of a particular variety of tree, and they would sell 1,000 a year, and they'd plant another 1,000. Well, what happened was, with the recession, fewer and fewer trees were selling, so the growers cut back on how many they were planting. And so, give or take around 2013, all of a sudden, there was a call for, oh, we want some big trees. Well, they're not to size yet, so you could get stuff from, say, Oregon and some of those places that had some bigger trees, but just the cost of shipping them from the west coast to the east coast and then planting them. So it's not just the purchase price of the tree, it's what you need to do in some cases for transport. Okay, you need specialized equipment to move them, you need specialized equipment to, the smaller ones would be in smaller wire baskets, some of the big ones would be huge baskets that you need specialized equipment to lower them in the hole and get them in. So it's just a case of, okay, where's the money coming from for the determination of what can be planted, when and where. Some things, with the rate that they grow, you might be able to get a bigger tree in and have it successfully catch, and others that might be beneficial to plant some, call it smaller size trees. But my gut feeling is that if you take down a 36-inch maple tree, 36-inch diameter, and put a 4-inch diameter in, people are going to go, well, what happened? You know, how come we didn't put bigger trees in? Not understanding that, yes, it's going to take some time for those trees to get the size. So that part can still be debated. It's also the funding, you know. How much is it going to cost, you know, 4 trees, to buy them, to transport them, to plant them as replacement trees in very specific areas. So.
Okay, yep, good. Point taken, we'll take all that under advisement. We won't be hamstrung by rules to allow for any variances like that. The other thing was the actual soil in the ground itself was going to be addressed again by tree warden here, and the suggestion to improve drainage was correctly apply gypsum or relevant compounds to help that. So,
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows when the last time was limestone was put down on either the upper or the lower green. And, you know, if the soil's acidic, then that can cause problems with the grass growing there, making it more difficult for the grass to grow. On the other hand, because of the years of use on it, soil tends to get packed down, and horticultural gypsum will loosen up particles of clay or silt or whatever happens to be there, so that you get better drainage. And if you get better drainage, then it makes it easier for the grass roots to go deeper, and as grass roots go deeper, then the grass will wind up not needing as much care to keep it happy, so to speak. It will also help with the issues where there tends to be areas where the soil is so compacted that water tends to pool there. Now, the gypsum is not going to do miracle things the first year, but doing it over a number of years and letting it, call it, work its way down into the soil, then it's, cost-wise, it's a lot cheaper to do it that way than to go out and start scraping off all the compacted soil and bringing in new loam and then getting it seeded and then trying to keep people off it until it gets established. So we'll start with the simple steps, the things that are easy. Put the lime down, because even with trees and shrubs that we consider acid-loving plants, you can get the pH so low that even they struggle to take up nutrients out of the soil because the soil is too acidic. That's a big problem in New England. If you look at maples like up in Vermont, that there's maple trees dying up there because the soil is too acidic. And so if we can just selectively put the lime down more in the areas where it's grassy areas that people are going to be using, less near the trees, just to bump the pH up a little bit to make it easier for the trees to grow, that's probably the best way to do that. And the lime may not have to be put down every year, but lime is relatively cheap. It's a way of maintaining, especially the grassy areas. You may not need to put as much fertilizer down to keep the grass happy if the pH is up where it belongs. So I think that's the best way of doing that.
If I could, so I'm John Higgins,
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Thank you
I'm the water quality guy with the waders on, cleaning up the pond.
thank you for your report.
You're welcome. Oh, thanks for the opportunity to help. It's a pond that needs help, and it's very close to me.
Yeah.
So, and actually, a lot of I talked to someone, the feedback I had is already kind of incorporated in some of your notes too, which is great. It's not sure who. In terms of gypsum, I would definitely, this is with a water quality thing, so it's anything with sulfate in it, I would try to avoid. It's actually sulfate that helps to drive the nutrients in the pond.
Yeah.
So calcium sulfate is what gypsum is. There's other limestone products that don't have sulfates, but I would just, in my experience, which is kind of at a high level in terms of nutrients, caution against the use of anything with sulfates in particular, because what it does is it interacts with the iron cycle, and it's the iron cycle that actually is what holds down the nutrients. I'm thinking in the pond, which is not the same as the tree warden world, but so that's the blend though. Is be careful what you put around the pond.
Right.
Yeah,
It's just a question
just
of
how you
where
use it.
apply, yeah.
And what's the impact on the pond?
So with the sulfates,
Yeah.
well, so without the presence of sulfates, what you have is you have this iron cycle. The iron it goes up and down, and it absorbs the nutrients. When you add sulfate in, it keeps the iron from becoming a mineral form, and also increases the degradation rate of the organic material, so it accelerates the release of nutrients. So it's like a driver of nutrient release, and it keeps it from being held long term. That's what sulfates do. You don't hear anything about that except from me, but
And what ultimately, so understanding that's the impact, like as someone looking at the pond, what would you see that would be different with?
well, you'll see more algae blooms.
More algae.
You'll see more algae blooms, and you'll see clearer water. Actually, the water will be clear because it'll have less iron in it, basically.
And
So-
the life in the pond as well.
It'll decrease yeah. I mean, it's a small pond. It isn't. Yeah, it's not. But there is surprisingly, I was surprised after that drought we had in 2016 that there was any fish left in there, and they're coming back strong. It's surprising, but so that's just my quick, and that's what I'm here for. I'm not a Newbury resident. I'm actually out of Amesbury, but yeah. But as many as you know, I spent quite a bit of time out there in my waders poking around. I have a report back there that people can look at.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Moving down the
Well,
subject.
Can we just, on this subject, we missed one thing here, putting down in here, because that's to improve drainage. We had a concern about the compaction of the soil. That was what the gypsum was
Oh,
about
yeah,
to some
yes.
extent. I think we should have in here, that the town do some borings there to find out, and we talked about this before, it just didn't get in here. Some
Right.
borings in various spots in the lawn there to find out how compact that soil really is and what it is. Jim?
Well, I think you'll find that
We went through that.
obviously the areas where you have rain and water tends to pool there for an extended period of time, obviously the drainage there isn't that good. And I think we can get very complicated on throwing a lot of money at an issue. Try some simple things first and see, if that makes a difference. I mean, the areas, I believe, where the gypsum would work the best would be way away from where the pond is. And that should help to break up those particles of soil, and in some cases it may only be a one-time thing, because the only other way around that is going to be if the water's there and doesn't tend to go away, so to speak, then it's going to mean digging up, replacing soil to, bring it back, and that I think can have maybe not equally as bad of an issue, but I think it still will be an issue. And again, I look at it, what can we do economically to try it? Because like I said, I think it's far enough away from the pond that any water that's draining there may not be an issue. And there's also the issue of what to do, around the pond.
Yeah, because mostly, if I'm not mistaken, is the side of the baseball diamond, that's where the majority of the ponding is, and where the soil seems to be the most
Actually, it's right field.
damaged.
Right. Yeah,
It's right field where the problem is the worst,
it's quite flooded.
which is fairly close to the pond.
Yeah, so I'm a geologist too, so I would say it seems clayey out there to me. I mean, it used to be being on the wetland.
Well, we assume that, but
Yeah.
you don't know unless you
dig it.
No, I think that's,
take
I'm,
more.
there may be data out there already, but I think doing a few hand-auger borings down 5 feet or something would help tell you. At least, a soil scientist or someone, just to see. I mean, if it's pure clay, you're not gonna really aerate very much for very long, and you may wanna favor the species that do well in clay soils. That's, But yeah, you can see like the old drainage for, when they put high road in there, it's kind of changed the drainage pattern, but you can see where the drainage goes toward that baseball diamond, where it used to be historically. It's just the way it is.
Well, the baseball diamond's always been there.
Well,
Not
the
really.
wetland was there before the baseball diamond, but yeah, sure.
As long as it's
Yeah, I know,
baseball
but you
diamond,
can see that kind of, it's kind of coming from that area, and if
Yeah.
that's what you mean by the wet area, but,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, good. We'll put that on the list.
Yeah, I think so.
The next 4 items to do with maintenance and are fairly self-explanatory and obvious, like sorting out the flagpole, which both needs a repaint and needs checking because the bottom sort of through 2 or 3 feet is not in good condition.
Right.
Well, oh yes, we're going to come to the pond. We'll do with all the pond ones together, I think. And the backstop, which there was a good idea of, came through for planting shrubs behind it, which sort of acts as a safety barrier as well, which I don't know whether anyone has any views on that. Low-lying shrubs behind it. And then cleaning up the walkways and things, which are all these are sort of necessary things we need to do. And then plantings around the monuments, and there came up with the idea of soliciting help from the local garden societies to regenerate or reinvigor the whole plantings around the monuments on the green, because they've been left unmanaged for years. I don't know whether anyone has any ideas about that, but seemed like a bit of colour as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think you'd find volunteers
Yeah.
that either exist today or would be glad to come and change through the years. And flower gardens would be a great thing for them.
I think so. Make it a project for them, and we'll need to find someone to approach all the various people. But indeed, any ideas you have of people to help in that, that would be done. Now, the next various items here relate to the pond, and going back to an earlier one here, is the pond has a lot of issues with it in terms of overflow, drainage. There's a sinkhole at one end that still hasn't been repaired, and
That's a safety hazard, yeah.
yeah, so there are quite a few things that came up dealing with the pond, and importantly, making sure there isn't a return to the various algae bloom issues, which blighted it over the last few years, probably longer than that. So, on the pond at the moment, I believe you say it's overflowing because it's not draining off. So
Yes, that's kind of my bailiwick, I
Exactly.
guess. Yeah, the pond does not drain to the bottom of the outlet. It's the lowest it's drained is about 1.5 inches above the outlet, and that's in spells when we haven't had rain for a week, so it should have drained to that point. And that has a backup influence onto the flooding on the ball
on the
field.
rest, right?
1.5 inches may not sound like much, but there's obviously somewhat of a blockage somewhere there in the drainage system between the pond and the catch basin
Where does it
And that
drain
should be
to?
corrected. Yes, it may be related to that sinkhole, I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's right, it doesn't, there's a grading, there's a square
The
grade.
grading is also a
And
problem.
it isn't, well, yeah, but it's, the water level's up into the grade level.
Right.
So there is something going on, like I've never looked at the water behind the grade, but from what I understand, it drains to the stormwater system, storm
So it
sewer
goes
system
down to the
on
very
the High Street, yeah. But, yeah, maybe someone should take that grading off and see if the
Well, it
piping
isn't
is-
the grading, because if you look inside the grading, the water's at the same level. But if you
It's
look
not
in the catch basin, I didn't
Yeah.
measure it, but the
Yeah.
water in the catch basin looks lower.
Well, someone has to get out and just do a survey, someone has to just get in there and do the elevation,
Yeah.
and see what's going on.
And
He's
as I-
right, there is something that's, you know, I can't.
And, yeah, I'm glad you're here, because
Yeah.
the other thing is the grading. Personally, I have a problem with the grading, and then, what is that, 3/4 of an inch
Something like
screen,
that,
something
yeah,
like that, or
something
less,
like
maybe
that.
it's a half.
Yeah,
And when the leaves get stirred up, it plugs up the grading, and then it won't drain at all.
huh,
I think they should have bars or something, because they're trying to keep big stuff from getting in the storm drain. I understand that. But I think that's too fine a screen.
yeah, but it could clog up like where you can't get to it. though.
Yeah, I understand that.
That's if it's big.
Well, if it got maintained adequately.
Well, yeah, that's, so you can see the pluses and minuses, and there are definitely, actually, it was nice to hear someone say you're considering what types of trees to plant relative to leaves, because you do have a lot of leaf litter, like, whether it's just fall down or wind blowing in, and once it hits the pond, it stays there, and then it either stays in the pond, it gets eaten up by the polywogs, or it goes to that section where the outlet is. I haven't seen the leaves behind the outlet yet. That is an area where they do collect, but I'm sure it must happen if the water level's right and the wind's right and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. I don't know what the best solution is for that, but
It's annual maintenance, isn't it?
Well,
maintenance is always,
Or after seasonal maintenance, I
No. The leaf problem, well, when you have it, it would be a daily problem, honestly.
you almost want to have like a Friends of the Green, or,
Yeah, that would be
like
good.
Adopt a Green program or something, or people do like that.
I go over and do that every
Yeah.
year.
Well, that's what it is.
Kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, they'd love to do that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Friends of the Green.
Your kids
Yeah.
would do that,
Leave a
there you
little
go.
leaf scoop
I
or
like
something or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Are you putting on this on payroll?
Right, yeah. Yeah, they're getting paid the same that we're getting paid right now for doing this. It's all from right here.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Oh, triple the pay.
A good idea.
Triple the hearts.
But, and the sinkhole is a Department of Public Works issue as well, because it's.
Yeah, because we don't know exactly where it is. You look on the map, on the plan rather, and it's really close to the line of the street, the highway
I
line.
actually don't know what the sinkhole is.
Oh, wow, they got a cone on it. You've been there lately. They've got a cone sitting
Well,
on
not
it.
since the summer, but. this is
Yeah,
probably-
yeah, there's a
Oh,
barrel, it's right
It's a
at the edge of where that crosswalk is, across from the
Oh,
bank.
okay.
So
Where the
basically,
outlet
right
kind of area
where
is.
that ends.
Right near where the outlet is?
Yes.
Yeah,
So maybe there is something going on there.
Yeah.
where there's-
yeah,
So,
It's all
Okay.
caved in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and right by that outlet too, some of the landscaped wall top stones that come off too, I don't know, if that's,
I didn't notice
I
that.
didn't
I
notice
didn't
that
know, I
either.
didn't notice that.
yeah, that's.
We'll have to.
Yeah,
High
it's-
roads.
I don't know, whatever.
I got some pictures, by the way, from 1950s, in
Yeah.
really nice color of the green.
Oh, wow.
And how the trees looked then, there was a night and day
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, well, a
It'll
lot of
take
those
us
are
a while
gone.
to get back to that.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, but it's
We
like,
can,
we can maybe show, if I can blow some of them up,
sure.
it'll show what we had before and what we can do again.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Take
So-
that to your board.
Huh?
Yeah.
Take that to your board.
Exactly.
So while we're
Take that to your leaders.
while we're on the pond, any other observations from your work during last year?
Well, I think in terms of long-term use, is you do want to try to keep the nutrients out as much as you can, and I think to the extent that I can figure, it's probably the geese. Because it has to come from someplace, and some does come with precipitation and dust and things like that, but at a larger scale, things that you can point to, I think the area around there is all sewered, right? There's no private septic
No,
systems.
no, just the opposite.
They're all private septic around there? All right, so the two things it could be would be the geese. No one actively fertilizes those fields anymore anyway, right?
That's a good question.
Well, I haven't seen it myself anyway, but it doesn't look like anyone has
Well, they've
been,
done
let's put it that way.
Whether they spread lime or whether they spread fertilizer, I have seen them spread.
All right, basically, when you add nutrients in, it allows things to grow. And so when you add nutrients to a pond, the things that grow are the things like algae and plants like that. And so where are the nutrients coming from? And I actually tested some geese poo last year because I'm trying to solve it for myself in the town. That is a big contributor in terms of percentage for each drop in. And you can look at how many times a goose poops in a day. And last year we had like 60 geese that decided to call that place home, and they basically loaded up with a good bit of nutrients. So I'll probably have to redo this year what I've been doing in the past. The other would be groundwater. So if you have septic systems, I'm not sure if that's an issue here because the way the groundwater may or may not flow, but that's another way where you can get nutrients coming into a pond. But that gets back to my sulfate stuff again. So sulfate, in the natural world without sulfates, the iron cycle could take up those nutrients very readily and permanently for all intents and purposes. But in the presence of sulfate, it takes that system out. And so in years, algicides and aluminum sulfate were added directly to the pond, and that just helps to keep fueling that system. It seems like it works for a while, but in the long term, it really doesn't.
What about a UV filter?
Well, it doesn't get the nutrients out, so what you do. One thing to do is get the nutrients out. The system that I had, I actually was harvesting the algae, and that's part of a patent that I have now. And the algae takes up the nutrients, so we'll take out the algae, and so go the nutrients, right? It wasn't so, and that's what I did, and it worked out great. But you still have to address where are the sources of nutrients that are still coming in. And part of that equation is things like sulfate, which helps keep what little you have continually available. So get rid of your sulfates, and the algae actually takes up sulfur too, which is great. So it takes up sulfur, iron, and phosphorus, and nitrogen. It's fixated on nitrogen. They're like gold little nuggets of nutrients you can pull out. But you have to address long-term wise, and some people have it here, is, you should, some people have been feeding ducks there, and they, I see like huge like mounds of breadcrumbs or whatever, whatever, but some people, a little sign doesn't have to be big, particularly where they go, that kind of the easternmost side of the pond, for whatever reason, where they park their car and step out, put a little thing saying, please don't feed the ducks or something. And the geese are, that's a safety net for them, and they love to eat grass and stuff. So, they can land in that, they can croak and eat the grass, and they go back into the pond where they're safe. So you need to take out the feeling of safety for them.
And they come back every year knowing it's safe.
Yeah, they're smart, and even if you make it not safe, they'll still check it out, and
Yeah.
if it seems like things have changed, they'll come back again. So it's kind of like behavior modification, and so that's kind of the ways you can do that is either you make it so they can't fly out in and out of the pond very easily. They feel safest in the pond. So if you can create a visual barrier, which is not going to be, it's more aesthetics now, people aren't going to like that as much, but I'm just saying it works. If you put a 4-foot fence or a hedgerow around the pond, the geese wouldn't like it because they couldn't really get airborne enough. They can really, stressed, but normally they couldn't, so they wouldn't like that so much. That's going to have aesthetic issues though, and it could be temporary. But the other thing people do is they put in, active decoys in the pond. And one thing I saw is just me observing things which worked, like in 2018, 2019, until about October, November of 2019, we didn't have many geese coming in. And I think it's because there was a group of kids that had these radio-controlled boats zipping along, and geese hate that because they don't feel safe. They'll go somewhere else. So I'm just saying that this is a community pond. Maybe there's some way of kind of facilitating that as the model boat area. We're encouraged people to go out there and kind of sail some little things around the geese hate that still supports the goal of the town. That was the thought.
Yeah, that was in your report. You
Yeah.
also mentioned about some plantings around the pond that might make it a little.
Yeah.
It sounded good too, I guess.
Well, yeah, if it's amenable to people, you know, the other thing I did put in there that didn't come through is, so you get X amount of nutrients a year, and, you know, you can limit that by how many geese you have, and you still have some that comes down in precipitation, roadway runoff, things like that. I do think there's a natural cycle too with like the amphibians and the tadpoles, and all the frogs have tadpoles, and they all eat the detritus in the bottom of the pond. And then they become frogs, and the herons come and eat the frogs. That's taking out the nutrients from the pond. And so the things that you can do that, you know, is consistent with your overall goals, that maintains that natural flux of, you know, good for frogs, is maybe good for the pond overall. And so, you know, that's one of the things I'd recommend, is that you do try to keep some areas that are frog friendly or something like that. You wouldn't have to give the whole pond, but,
Yeah.
you know.
Especially when I read today that the average goose drops at least a pound every day.
Yeah,
Per goose.
yeah.
Per day.
Yeah.
No, it's like it's like 1.8 to 2.4 pounds a day.
And the thing is that green is used regularly by kids playing on and all the rest of it. I've seen people going around hand picking up the stuff.
Yeah. It's almost impossible to walk. I mean, when the geese are there full-fledged, you almost have to forget about looking where you step, because you just couldn't do anything. You'd be just constantly.
Yeah.
So.
And also, there are diseases with it, or you can pick up from the droppings that are transmitted, can jump into human.
Yeah, well, one of the questions someone had about a fountain, and the issue, the thing I just caution people about a fountain is, well, one, water quality-wise, I didn't see how it would help, because we still have fish in the pond, so I know there's enough dissolved oxygen. But if you have a fountain up, you'll aerosolize some of those droplets, and if it has bacteria, like fecal matter, it may not be something you really want, particularly if you think you're doing it because of water quality. If you're doing it for aesthetics, you folks are the ones that decide that, because you're Newbury.
We were talking about
An aerator?
Yeah, aerator, but that's the same thing.
Well, actually, it would aerosolize as well. So, and it actually, what it does is it pushes the algae to the side, which is where people walk around and dogs get. Yeah. So, anyway.
Robin?
Yes.
I had a couple of questions for John. Do you have I'm Jim Moran, I live on Elm Street, John.
Hey, Jim, nice to meet you.
I met you a year ago down one day. Do you have plans for 2020 to continue your program?
Well, I think I'm going to have to because of the geese from the fall. So, I mean, it was kind of a shocker. So, it isn't in my report because it came up afterwards. But yeah, we had like 60 odd geese come, and so what I'd like to do that again in the fall. I mean, this year I'll talk to the selectmen and the conservation commission again. But what I'm going to try to do is automate my system a little more too, so you're not going to see me in waders as often, hopefully.
So far, it's been a no cost to the town. Is that your plan?
Yeah, there's no cost to the town. I mean, the town pays for our laboratory fees, because I just said I don't want a direct cost for me. I mean, at my time, if my meeting gets canceled or I'm between jobs, like I run out.
Sure. So at least for 2020, you're going to continue. Now, if in fact you find out this program works well, what would your recommendation be to the town in the future? Is this something you'd have to come in and do once a year, or more often, or less often? And then what cost might be associated with that?
Well, so there's no cost to the town except for paying for laboratory fees, and I committed to doing that without any time limit in that. But the goal was, and where I was able to show that, is we pulled out all those excess nutrients.
Right.
So as long as you can control the nutrients coming in, you'll have it sustained, and I think partly it's the sulfates.
Right.
That'll make a pond more of a sustaining pond. That is the goal. So when you see me cleaning up out there, it's to take out those excess so you can have a sustainable pond. And when you see me giving recommendations about the geese and you know, I think getting some soil data from just some, I have a hand auger too, if people want me to, more than happy to go down. And I'm a geologist, I can do a few, you know, I just want to make sure I'm not quite with utilities or something, but just to look at that overall program and say, what can we do to make a pond more sustainable? So, you know, I'd be cautious about using nutrients around the pond, because it's just going to go right in the pond. Could. You can look at soil types around the pond to see if you need to do for aeration. But I don't, so in terms of the cost of my system, I can tell you that it's been wonderful for me to have the Newberries as an area for me to do some field proof of concept proofing basically. And I'm already covered like the state of Florida entirely with applications to use that technology. Because of what I've learned in Newberry. And I've also, with the National Oceanic Administration, have a huge grant application with them now in the Cape. But cost-wise, I haven't actually thought of Newberry in terms of long-term, because I'm actually hoping there really isn't a long-term.
It's
That's
possible
open.
that we can solve the problem. And
Yeah, I think if you pull it out, I mean, how many other ponds in Newberry? The lower green pond's almost kind of a separate, I mean, talking about sulfate, it's huge, it's got huge, it's an old salt marsh down there. It's loaded with sulfates, but that's kind of its nature. So, but, there's not that, how many other ponds in Newberry are there that have issues with algae?
Town
What's-
ponds, not really.
Yeah, so hopefully you don't have, yeah, hopefully you don't have to worry about that as well.
would there be any advantage to try to dredge the pond at any point?
Well, that's originally, so I'm here to provide feedback to people. So that was actually one of the first, I have three patented technologies. One of them is to dredge. And that's actually which initially approached Newberry, was to look at dredging that pond. But it had concentrations of arsenic in particular that made the price, which is not uncommon, but because it's the way that it happens in the environment, it made it cost prohibitive to have to basically take that soil sediment and go to a landfill. And so, but arsenic is a naturally occurring compound, but what happens in ponds is it's what they call a redox sensitive element. So instead of going down in depth in the sediment, it keeps getting recycled to the surface. So when you try to talk about dredging, which is the top surface, it also happens to be where most of the arsenic tends to build up over time. So it isn't scary arsenic levels. Trust me. I mean, you'll find more in an apple orchard, I think.
I know somebody in that business, and he said arsenic is ubiquitous.
It is.
It's a natural occurrence, and there's a lot of difference between the natural arsenic and what industrial arsenic.
And you can concentrate naturally occurring levels of arsenic. I have a huge site against ExxonMobil right now where they had a gasoline release and it created reducing conditions which solubilized the arsenic out of the rock, and then it precipitated out. Yeah. So they created a problem from a natural. So, but anyway, it was high enough that it just would have added costs for disposal, which just didn't make it feasible. So we went with the third technology, which was to take out the algae itself, which we tested for metal. That wasn't an issue. So,
however, your point is we should be testing it regularly.
Well, if you want to dredge, I mean, one advantage there.
Dredging, testing for algae, so because your technology works.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty visual. So, I mean, the nice thing about it is it's pretty quick. So, like, if it happens again, so like another town, say not Newberry, someplace, they could mobilize it, and I have, like, oh, what's this algae bloom doing back here? Within a day, you can be mobilized, you can harvest it out, and you'd be gone in a day. That's the short term. So long term, you saw me parking out there, because there were days when that algae was just, if the sun was shining, and the wind was blowing right, I would just sit on that stone wall, and you could see it popping up and flowing into my trap. It was great for me. It was like the perfect job, Yeah. But what the nice thing about it is we're taking those excess nutrients out of the pond from just years of accumulation. And so to answer his question, once you get the years of accumulation out, you just gotta kind of watch what goes back into the pond and maintain, if you're able to, the natural system of the pond for dealing with that. And one is getting sulfates out of the pitcher. It's the worst thing ever. And then the other is, frogs are a good thing to have if you can, and same with the fish. The fish eat just little particles, they eat the insects, and then the herring and the mergansers come and they eat up the fish, and it takes that out.
Have you reached the point where you've taken out all the excess?
We actually did until those 60-odd geese came in last year and pooped, they said we
So,
pooped everywhere. No, we did.
You've effectively taken out all the extra, and
Yeah.
it's just gonna be supplemented every year with the geese and whatever else.
Yeah, I mean,
Feeds
maybe every 5 years you call Higgins up and say, could you pull out that thing, and maybe that I give you one or something, someone else can do that. But the issue I have, this is me as a business, is some of that algae can be quite toxic, and people ask me if it is, like, well, I assume it is, I haven't tested it, which is an honest answer, but some of it can be, and you hear about pets being injured by this stuff, and so you do want to keep it out. Whenever it becomes at a gross level, if you can take it out, but there's also good algae. And so one of the things that I'm up against is with my technology is like, well, how do I not trap and take out the good algae? Like, well, if it's excess, I just think it's a good thing to get rid of it. But you do have to kind of have some targeting ability. But one of the ways you can look at it is if you have a pond like Evergreen Pond, and so let's say 3 years from now, half the pond turns bright green. That's telling you probably got some excess nutrients, and you may want to get the Conservation Commission's approval if it's not already, just to take it out. My technology will do that. But ultimately the goal, so if you look at that report, we got the concentrations of nutrients down to a level that would exist that would not support dense algae blooms. It's what they call oligotrophic. It's almost nutrient poor. That's what we got it down to. Because the algae, I don't want to make this whole talk about me, but the algae that I'm pulling out is exceedingly good, evolutionary, at taking up and storing excess nutrients. I mean, they'll find it just to keep and propagate. So if you keep taking the algae out, they're scavenging that pond of any other nutrients it can find. And so if you can take out the algae, you're taking out the excess nutrients. But there is a good versus bad algae, and I'm dealing with that now, but that's okay.
Oh, thank you very much. For
Okay. I think I've hit it. So there's the goose decoy things, but I think that the boat thing is probably help you with that.
Yeah, we've this one came up many times on how to deal with the geese. And there are electronic means as well as decoys and stuff like that.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions for me? Because I don't want this is a Newbury meeting. You can always.
I haven't.
No.
Anyone else?
Finding that whole deal fascinating, so
Yeah.
it's good, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And thank you. It's been helpful to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, on the geese thing, I actually have, which I've circulated, the actual apparatus that is suggested. It's used by golf clubs and parks and things like that to repel goose. It sets certain frequencies that it only affects the goose and not any other wildlife, so which we can circulate around.
Thank you.
If you're interested. And it also goes through a lot of description of very nasty things that geese have in their
Thank you, sir.
all that. So also on there we ought to have came up we ought to have some warning signs, hopefully discreet. Everyone okay with that? Good. Let me see, you had encouraging the use of radio control boats, and you pointed out they were effective.
I got it from him.
Oh,
It was
you did?
in the email that was
Yeah.
forwarded, yeah.
Okay, there was a
Take my vote up.
pond spotlight, which we It's just a question of maintenance to make sure it works.
And I think we want to make sure we change to an energy efficient bulb.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a real antique that's up there.
Yeah. I think this system here, which is circulating around, operates off a photoelectric cell battery, so it's
Solar,
pretty good.
solar operated.
Yeah.
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 So, the last few items, yes, we got the, just to, which is something we have to do, doesn't really affect the green, is to determine which bits are the green and which bits are the state's property, which is not
Or the
clear
town layer.
from any of the maps exactly what they are, which might have an effect on
Well, it's going to have an effect on where to
who
plant
does
trees, for one
where to
thing.
plant trees and who does what in terms of any necessary public works requirement.
It also will have something to do with parking of vehicles, because you can park on the street.
Right.
And a lot of that grass between the street and the street layout line is partly grass, but it's partly someplace you can park. And then if you set the trees back from that, you're not going to park on tree roots. So,
Yep.
But the terminology here,
It should be-
you said determine town versus state lines. I think you're trying to make the determination between the green property and the road layout lines.
Right.
Okay.
And then the next one came up was attaching and flying flags along the telegraph poles.
I'm looking, yes, we got.
So, which apparently there were or there are now or what? I can't remember whether they're not.
There's
No,
nothing.
There's
there,
nothing. So just people then attach them to the...
No, there's nothing
They don't
ever happened.
attach them.
They're not in Old Town, but they are in Byfield.
Right.
Oh,
From Memorial Day to Veterans Day.
yes. Well, that's all right.
Yeah, and I guess on this one, I would actually, despite being on the committee, would actually speak out against this one, because I really like the fact that the green right now is very pastoral and natural, and I like being able to look out on the green or spend time on the green and just have it be mainly naturally occurring as opposed to man-made flags. So I would put one vote against the flags.
Any views on the flags?
Yeah, we're after what input we get from them.
I think it looks nice in Byfield at the holidays, and also,
Oh,
I think it looks sharp in Raleigh when you drive to Raleigh
Yep.
for the holidays. I just think it's a classy, doesn't have to be all the time, but you know, for like 4th of July and Memorial Day, it's like, it would be easy to put them up and down. That's just something, I've lived in the Green for 66 years.
Isn't that a Boy Scout project
Could be.
No. What, in Byfield?
in By?
No,
No.
it's private,
Private.
guys just do it for the,
It could be a Boy Scout project. There is a.
Because the telephone poles are owned by
By
the
the utility.
utility companies.
Right.
So we have to get permission.
Somebody else out there got an opinion on that?
I think the town was talking about that because they have in the budget for Memorial Day celebrations, and I think they were talking about getting flags to put out on the green.
A lot of the money that's out there for that is for flags for the cemeteries, for the veterans' graves. So it says Memorial Day flags, that's what it is.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Oh.
I believe so.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we
Something
could
is cool.
ask for a show of hands or something if we're getting nothing from the public.
So who's in favour of the flags?
Really?
But again, you're talking a limited window. Yeah, limited window. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and are we talking basically the high road side? I think that's what we talked at the
Yes.
last meeting.
That's what we talked about.
Yeah.
I guess Lisa will be on the.
Or view. Okay, and the final item was having done all this work, we have to lay down some sort of maintenance schedule, which clearly has been lacking over the last few years, to see that the renewal and repair and reassessment of tree program continues.
When this come out of the DPW in town?
You would think so, yeah.
I mean, they cut it,
Yeah.
they cut it, and,
Whether they use it or
and
not.
I think, I agree with Fred, sometime in the last 5 years, they put something down there. I remember, I've seen them spread. I have no idea what
Yeah.
it is.
Right, me neither.
You're
I
right,
have
yes,
no
they
idea.
did.
They did the Lower Green too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, they maintain it.
Well,
And-
they do that. I don't know if I go so far as to say they maintain it.
I think they just.
Well,
They mow it and they do that. That's
Well,
I
about
think they
it.
just manage.
There's been branches on the green all winter.
Oh,
They haven't
I'll
been
give a
picked
stick
up.
out, when they did Parker Street, I mean, not Parker Street, Green, put Green Street in your front of your house, they did, I think they did a decent job of addressing, putting grass back in and grading it.
Oh, you mean after they
Right,
paved the
after
road?
they put it.
Yeah, they
There
did do
was-
a nice job
there was-
with that,
There was
yeah.
quite a bit, they put a lot of hot top down,
Yeah,
but I think that they did a very nice job of grading it and planting it right away.
yeah, they did do a good job.
And like I said, except for a couple of people that went off the road and plopped right into it,
But that's
Yeah.
probably part of the road layout, not part of the green.
It,
More than likely.
It's on, yeah, it's on the green side, it's like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, you're right, I don't know where the road starts, and,
That's right.
yeah, we got a lot of surveying to do someday.
Yeah. Some.
I guess one question on the maintenance too, it's not on this list, but something that people have mentioned to me is that the weed whacking can hurt the trees. I guess
Okay.
this is a
Yeah.
question for Tim. How damaging is that for the trees, or is it not that big of a deal?
Well, I think the older trees, it's probably not as much of an issue as it would be with younger trees, because the older trees have got thicker bark, and
Yeah.
it's not necessarily gonna be a problem, but,
So I wonder if it's worth just flagging that
well, I
to,
mean, the other thing you can do is you can come out.
oh,
from
mulch
the
around it, yeah.
Trunk of
Any
the tree, yeah.
trees, I would do
Yeah.
Mulch
that.
around
For the
it.
new trees.
Well, if you plant any sweet birch, you can't use a trimmer against a birch tree, that's for sure. They're very delicate.
Well, I think once they get big enough,
No.
it's not gonna be as much of a problem, but the grass shouldn't be up against the trees anyway.
Sure.
There should be
yeah.
a space
That could be
around it to allow water to go down. There's the argument that the area to not have mulch up against the tree, okay? Here's the tree, and you get the volcanoes where the mulch
Oh,
comes
yeah.
up that way. That'll damage the bark more readily than a weed whacker would.
It's like putting
But
fill around it,
They talk about anywhere where you have the flare of the trunk of the tree, which could come out any number of feet, that should all be a couple of inches of mulch around there, so that, it does prevent anybody from going in there with a weed whacker and cutting it and hitting it, and allows water to go down in, and nutrients to go down in, if you're gonna fertilize the trees. So, yeah,
But that's your purview.
yeah, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Looking at the laws in Massachusetts, the tree warden is responsible for the trees in all situations in town, if it's on town property. So whether it's called the schools or parks or any of those things. But the issue is, you can't go on to private property to do it, and you sure can't start messing with state trees if, the side on the high road side. We have to figure that one out before we can do anything on that side. Where's the state bounds, and, then,
Would that be a matter of contacting the state DPW?
the state has layouts of the highways. I know when I had the garden center in Salisbury, we had surveying done, and there was state bounds along the road, and discovered things like, at one point further down on Bridge Road, there was a stream that's no longer there, that 1935 map of the layout of Route 1. So, I mean, I'm sure this, if they had the layout of Route 1, I'm pretty sure they had the layout of 1A somewhere
Yes,
in the
but
state files.
further down in my neighborhood, there are stone bounds established, and I know that from where I used to work. They're placed at a 2-foot offset, so they're 2 feet into the state highway where those bounds are. So it's 2 feet from the drill hole to the edge, but I see none in the green area or anywhere. So I don't, either they were there once and they're gone, or I don't know.
It could have been at one time.
I don't know, but I don't see it.
They didn't use necessarily always stone like they do now, that it just could be an iron pipe, and in some cases it would say in the layout that it's 35 feet off the oak tree.
Yeah,
Or-
that isn't
The
gonna
oak
help.
tree ain't
That
there
won't help us
anymore, so it
much.
makes it kind of hard to know what's what, but I don't know.
But it is on our to-do list to
Yeah,
determine
that's what
Yeah,
where they all are.
It's a-
The
But
highway
it is
department-
gonna be a matter, we have to contact somebody at the state level, because Route 1A is a state road, so that we can determine exactly what trees we can work on, and,
that's what a surveyor does, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's at the
Okay.
state level.
Yep.
But that's
Good.
what a surveyor does.
So that's the to-do list. Oh, thanks for the-
I knew it, even though we take
Uh,
them separately.
sticking
but-
Yeah, any other questions or
Yeah,
anything?
okay.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
there anything in particular you would want me to bring back to my board? Because we have a part of the selectmen's meeting updates.
Yeah.
I mean, I got some good information here to bring them up to date. Was there anything
We were gonna give
particular
them the list.
you
We
would like?
gave, well, firstly, we did give them, back in November.
Yeah, right.
list.
Yes, I remember that.
Right,
Yeah.
and there doesn't seem to be action. but-
Let me see if I can
But
present this
that
list.
that list is.
I will present
pretty-
this list and I'll see if I can get some action going,
You're right.
okay?
Well, we're gonna officially submit that.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because afterwards, we'll gather, we'll clean up, incorporate some of the comments here, unfortunately, keep the flags on, and then we'll clean it up
Oh,
and
okay, all right,
then send it.
Very good, okay. We got a meeting a week from Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mention that you did show up.
That's a lot of
Right,
power.
okay.
But I think the charge is left to us to come to them
Okay,
with.
but that's what I'm saying, I was asking
what the
tonight,
idea is,
is there anything particularly you want me to bring, if your report was ready? Is there any hot items you'd like dealt with right away?
No,
Okay, all right.
they're all,
Gotta do it.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
and I think we can progress pretty well from today,
Yeah.
with your help as
Yeah.
well, because we have some resource and money to affect things without,
My hat's off to the committee, I mean, you guys have done, I think, an excellent job,
right,
really.
thank you.
Thanks.
Suggestion, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
If he wants to take something back to the selectmen, it would probably be a lot easier for the Board of Selectmen to request layout of High Road and say, we need to know where High Road is laid
I
out,
do that, I
so
do that, I do
that,
that.
then we know. That's gonna
Have
be a
them
lot quicker
contact
than,
the state
yeah.
specifically, yeah,
Yeah.
that's.
yeah, good point, thank you.
I'd like to comment on that.
Yes,
I believe, and I think this will happen before this is all done, that you're gonna hire an engineering firm, just like Green ER did 2 years ago. They've already done the layout, you know, you really need a full-size drawing of what you're gonna do. With that, and they probably have the ability to pick up the phone, call the state, and get the control for High Road. And they'll be able to come out there in 2 hours and lay out the boundaries for you.
You're absolutely
So
right.
I think that would be my first thought is hire an engineer, the same people who've already done this, and say, hey, listen, we're setting aside $5,000 for you in the next year or two, and give them some scope of work and have Tracy give them a purchase order. That, I think, can greatly help you through the other things. They've got utility information, state highway layouts, all the intersects between the town and the state properties, everything you need. That being said, it leads me into a master plan, a master schedule, and a budget. I think overall, I think you have a pretty good idea what you want to do, which is the plan. The schedule, I see it as a multi-year project. And I'm hoping you see the same thing. And if you take off the bites for the next 3 to 5 years, I think 5 years from now, you can have a beautiful place down there. With that comes a budget, and I've got to think somewhere, maybe it starts here, if it's nothing more than something handwritten to start the process. And if so, do you need some more money this year? Beyond the $50,000 that's been already set aside, do you need more money? And you're going to propose to the town that they have a warrant to authorize another $20,000, $50,000 to move ahead with some more aspects of the plan?
Right.
That would be my suggestion, and in the fall, if you needed more money. But to me, the budget, and if you use anything that you heard last year from the Green ER, they had planned on spending $500,000 to $700,000.
Yeah.
Don't know what the town may want to spend considerably less, or they want to say, listen, over 5 years, that's a reasonable number, if we really want to bring this back to the beautiful place that we all really want it to be. My other last thought was, I hope you incorporate the upper and the lower green together, and consider it to be sort of one project, under one umbrella, and certainly the lower green needs work, considerably less in scope than the upper green. But it would really be good to bring them both along at the same time.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And indeed, some of those points we have discussed, and although, and as regards the upper and lower green together, that was discussed, but our original charge was very specific to the upper green. But indeed, the work done by the tree warden is actually probably going to encompass both greens anyway, under his side of things. So it'll naturally gravitate towards
I
that.
think Jim's comment is more appropriate to be brought up when this is presented to the selectmen.
Yeah.
That's when you would bring that up, that you should incorporate the lower green as well. Because that's not our charge, so.
No,
No, but you can forward that thought to the
right,
selectmen, right?
that's absolutely.
Well, I suppose we could, yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other thoughts? Good.
I guess the only other note on the funds, because I know that we mentioned there's the 50,000-ish pool of money that the Lund sisters have left. There's a little bit of money with the tree budget, but it might be worthwhile too just seeing if there are any options for donations, because I think a lot of people with respect to the Green ER plan, I think a lot of that was basically donations or people saying that they were going to donate. So it's possible if the town offered that up as an option that people would be open to it.
I think that's a great idea. If I'm not mistaken, the monument right there beside the post office, the World War II victims, I think people gave money to the town, helped defray the
Yes.
cost. This could be another perfect example. I know Tracy and the board would certainly know what you can do and what you can't do with
Yeah.
donations. But I'd be surprised if some significant ones couldn't be made, people would give.
Yeah.
My understanding is if they're targeted to a specific place for a specific use, then within their best possible efforts, that is where, and if it isn't all used, it is still targeted, tagged that that's what the money was donated for, so, says the accountant.
Okay, very good. Any other thoughts? Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, yes.
Take a break, and maybe we'll discuss that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Reopen.
We're reopening the meeting.
Who's gonna do the minutes?
That would be the secretary.
Tony and I both have some suggestions, I'll let Tony go first.
In the preliminary work that we do with the trees, and that, I think that we ought to have a dig site before that, so we can prep the site full. Do it now, so we can prep the site, planting later. Like Mr. Higgins said, even if you go in and want to do test borings for dirt, we gotta know if there's any utilities and think getting the place laid out by dig safe would be a preliminary start too, along with, you know, the cutting of the tree, trimming of the trees.
Yeah.
And it's not a big, just call, actually there in the, you know, within 48 hours, and they'll lay the whole place out.
But, we didn't have the authority.
No, but this is recommendation.
Yeah,
This
this
is
is
a
a recommendation for the
Go on
select.
the
These
list.
are all recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Right,
can
right.
advise, but we, and recommend, but we can't take
I
it
guess
upon
you-
So
ourselves.
this one
I
needs to
guess
be
you would
put
put that
into.
number one.
Right, that's right. We're on
Number one,
Yeah.
dig safe. Yeah,
Something I'll call.
good suggestion.
No, it's get it done now.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
I don't think you got the, I know, this is what's frustrating.
Fred, yours was?
Yeah, I did. Jim Moran mentioned that it might be a multi-year deal. I don't know if we really need to do that, state that. But I do think when we talk about surveying the upper green, I think it should read that we contact the state DPW for the layout of Route 1A at the green and the rest of it, survey the upper greens to make
Yeah.
a determination. But I think that's a good point. That's number one. And the other good point he made was seeking donations. To
Yeah, I read that down, yeah.
and the reason I think that's such a good idea is because it happens to be right across the street from the 5-cent savings bank. So what do we call it now? The Newburyport Bank.
Newburyport.
Yeah. And they have an interest in this. And they probably will make a donation. And then when that happens, the institution has to make a donation to keep up with them. So,
Yeah.
no, serious.
That's an assumption
serious.
there that I don't know.
Oh, no, they have to keep up with each other. They look good. I mean, the institution
remember
right
you're
now
on
looks really
tape.
bad. So,
Yeah, they're not
Gotta
the
do
neighbor
things.
with a friend.
yeah, so I think that's a good thing to put down in these donations. He's right. They came up before, and Greenard did this, and there were people, he said he had people lined up to make donations.
Pages, yeah.
So, yeah, suggest that to the select.
Put that on the
Yep.
list as well.
And that could be last, that'd be a good place for it.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yep.
The other ones I could remember as we went along here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Christmas tree one got one of truly, no protestations there, which was
Yeah,
quite,
good.
quite good.
Sorry about the flag.
That's okay. They'll be on high roads, so that's good.
You know what, you're not really gonna be able to see them because the trees are there.
Right, that's.
Yeah.
We could stipulate that they only have to be up, what, Flag Day, Memorial
But then
Day,
who's putting them up?
4th of July,
When's Flag Day?
and maybe Labor Day.
A day you put flags up?
June 14th.
14th,
June 14th.
June,
Flag Day, Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day.
And you got test borings to go into the
I did
list
put
as
that,
well.
yeah.
And maybe Veterans Day. But anyway, I mean, it isn't a big deal to put them up for a weekend and take them down.
Yeah, they're just
What kind of, you know,
little things.
we have people in DPW that are, I hate to think what they do a lot of the time. So actually, I do see what they do. I don't care. I don't care.
But it tars us all, Fred.
Pardon?
It tars us all.
Okay. And I got a couple of suggestions of
Take the, bring the
approaching
flags.
who
bring
at
your
the
mobile
Newbury Garden
and stick 'em
Club,
in, you know.
Sherry, Maybe,
Well, you know, there used to be
blacksmith
a
shop.
beautification society that was
Right.
taking care of the greens in the 1800s.
I got it right
And
here.
again, in,
Old newspaper.
Well, you can
and
ask for.
again, things were
grants.
done in the 1980s, I think it was.
Then you can add that to the list.
Yep.
Suggest a
Yeah, suggest.
Well, I think
Yeah.
the Friends of,
Yeah, 1985, gifts of money and effort
Yeah,
to
right.
help pond restoration. They raised $15,000 to boost the Green Pond Restoration Project.
I bet you
Where's
could,
all that?
I bet you could get
They made a
people interested
walkway?
now.
Is that when they made the walkway?
1985. Hmm? Oh, Selectman James A. Lowell said the pond was once used to water an estimated 7,000 sheep. This was in the,
That does sound like a far reach.
the Newburyport Daily News.
Probably went dry after that.
Nah. One of the things that came to mind was Boy Scouts have Eagle Scout projects.
Yeah, I got that. Kids
Most
credit.
of the, if I remember right, I think Triton has a thing where kids have to do a certain number of hours of called community service.
Right.
So, yeah, and they get a credit for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the National Honor Society.
Yeah,
And
so.
A lot of the sports
the
teams
comment
have to
was
do some
Julie
stuff
Witt,
too.
At the Garden Club?
Yeah, the Boy Scouts.
Oh, Boy Scouts.
And they could do all the backstop,
Julie, how do you spell her last name?
WENDT.
Julie Wendt.
the other thing is, I know Salisbury used to get the town hall painted by inmates from,
Yeah,
Well,
County,
Newbury did too, they had.
county.
yeah, and all they
They've
had,
done various.
all they had to do was supply the paint and supply the pizza. And they came and did it, and, you know,
Yep.
I know there was a thing where they asked businesses to donate a gallon of paint for whatever it took, and that's how they got it done, essentially for free. And because
Yeah,
of the
they-
same thing, you know,
But
get out.
they also
get
send
to-
the inmates up, like in Newburyport, to clean the different cemeteries and things. So,
They did it after the big storms on the island too, because they had the food at Pitta Hall. They had,
Well, they can do that.
Minimal
for the backstop,
security.
but Can't do it for the pole.
No,
That takes,
that's gonna take special.
that's gonna take, well, I think the town garage can do it all right, but yeah,
Okay.
it will
let's
tilt.
take it
It's
up
got
twice.
chance.
It's good that Boy Scouts get a credit for it within
yeah,
that
so
thing.
like,
If
Boy
any of
Scouts
them-
better than
yeah.
Yes.
Well, they get credit for it too, actually. For good behavior. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the minimum, you know, they're not letting, you know, axe murderers pick up the litter of the green.
So did we get that down, that the selectmen should be maybe trying to reinstitute the beautification committee?
I wrote it down, yeah.
Okay.
That was in the 1800s.
No,
Just saying.
I think there's interest here now, I think that could.
Oh, I volunteer.
And the, do it in conjunction.
I think we'd
Yeah,
have a
they
lot of
could.
people around the green. Do that, although-
Okay, so,
And their kids.
wrap up the list again, not too much this time of the circular.
Yeah, yep. Yep,
And are
update.
we gonna schedule ourselves another meeting before we go
Well,
before the board?
I don't know,
No,
why do we need to do that? We've got this down here.
yeah, we just then send it. as-
I'll move that, I'll make a motion that we send this as our final recommendation for the selection.
One point of potential discussion before we do that is, I know that,
So wait a minute, do I get a second?
Um,
Do you
I
want a
don't think we
second?
have to do that.
Oh, yeah.
we're in an actual meeting now.
Yeah,
Did I get a second? No? Could be lost.
What was your, what was it again,
That-
your motion?
That we are gonna
Fred?
send
Revise
this,
the-
we have prepared here tonight, we have just discussed, to the Board of Selectmen as our final recommendations.
So we have more stuff to put on it.
Well, that, if I get a second, you can discuss it, otherwise,
right.
Okay, I'll second it then.
okay.
And now it's open
Now
for
you say-
discussion?
Now, say, any discussion?
Okay. So now I guess the question that I would have, which I don't feel strongly one way or another, is would it be worth going to the green one more time to, I know that, Tim, you haven't done your assessment yet, but we could at least take a look at clearly where the stumps are, and then also make it a little bit more clear where we'd suggest having trees fill voids.
They're all marked on the map already. on the green.
Oh, you mean we
ER
could just
map,
look on
they're all-
that?
Yeah, they're all
Okay, yeah.
marked out where the stumps are already, so.
And I just wonder, is it worth noting some of the voids as well? Just putting a little bit more meat on the bone? I mean, the other
As far
option
as
is,
planting trees, you're talking?
yeah.
Well,
I mean-
we already left it up to the
Yeah, I
tree
think
warden
that
to
the
make
tree,
those.
yeah, the tree planting is gonna have to be done after the tree assessment,
Right.
and if any have to come down, then I think they'll get a plan together on where to put the trees, right? So,
And they have to
the
figure
kind
out.
of the way you would do it.
And your plan will be also to, because I know that what's recommended here is it's not just where there's stumps or where trees come down, but also the voids as well.
Right, and then you have to get bids, well, you have to determine what trees you want where.
Right.
And you have to get bids
Right.
on those, because I'm guessing very quickly, even if you just replaced where the stumps were, you're probably gonna go over the $10,000 threshold where you'd have to go out to bids for getting the stuff. And so then it's gonna be a case of finding out who has the trees, what the cost is for
Yep.
buying the trees, transporting the trees to the green, and then,
Okay.
then the question comes up immediately, who's going to plant them?
Right, because if you have them planted, they'll warrant it.
Yeah, the
Warrant
only
it,
piece
right?
that I don't want to be lost is the voids too, like planting where there are empty spaces as well.
Well, we can just.
We have it here, but,
Right,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
And then one other question, Tim, for you. I know I asked this before, but I just wanted to clarify. The red maple, their leaves are green, right?
They turn red in the fall.
What are the trees that have the maroon leaves that look like?
That's Crimson King maple. That's part of the Norway maple family. And the Norway maples are on the invasive plant list, pretty much throughout New England.
So that's a no. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. That's just what I want, because I really don't like them.
No invaders.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I like
I
the
didn't know
green
that.
leaves.
That's
I just wanted to
interesting.
make sure they were.
They are
green.
pretty,
Well, what
yeah.
happens is in the fall, the leaves
What did
turn
you say?
red. They turn red.
Yeah.
Right,
Just to be clear. Okay,
Okay.
then,
right,
yeah.
so
So
discussed all
I
that,
have,
so
yeah.
all in favour of.
Oh, wait a minute, I don't know if anybody else has got any discussion.
Of, and the
Why are you
motion was
looking at me? You didn't listen to me last meeting.
Well,
so
you
here we
haven't
are.
been making any noise.
With
that's
no
all.
people here.
of
No,
sending by
Okay.
letter the whole attachment as is.
Well, that also means that nobody gets to comment on it before it goes out the door. Just saying. Can't have a discussion of the email. Oh, fix this,
I'll
oh,
just
fix
have
that.
to
You
remove
draft
the
the-
flag. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that.
Well,
We
the-
gotta
my
come
point
to a
is, we're-
conclusion at some point.
yeah, we're
Let's
at
make
we're at
this,
an end of our
And
6
if our,
month.
that's what I was
Yeah,
going to say,
that's
into
my
the
whole
selectmen, if we have to ask how long our responsibilities carry on for.
I think they
Until
said July,
6:30.
fiscal year.
Well, that was the appointment, but our
The
charge
appointment.
was 6 months.
Yeah,
I asked the
the-
question of how long we
Yeah.
had, and it was that the appointments are made
Yeah,
fiscal year.
for the fiscal year.
Yeah, I know that.
Anticipating that maybe the 3 months or 6 months that people might give out, they just make them random. There's no, it's not
oh, I didn't understand
It's not a
that.
specifically permanent thing. I asked, sent an email and got a response.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I heard the 6 months, I mean, through the end of June, but I still thought that the 6 months would hold.
No.
No?
You had 2 months off, so.
Yeah.
It does not mean that we have to continue till
But
6:30.
the longer
But
we
we have
drag
until
this
6:30.
out, the less something gets
It's
done.
done, right.
Right, I'm not arguing
Okay.
that. I'm just stating the
That's
facts
why-
of the appointment times.
Mhm.
If they give you 4 months, but they put you in for 7 months on the what you signed off to, that you were on this committee until, say, 6:30, if we needed that extra time, we have it because we've been appointed to it, is all I'm stating.
Okay.
So whether we need it or not,
Right.
we have it. If we don't need it, then we're good,
Yeah.
Right.
either way. But we don't have to worry about getting another piece of an appointment if we still had,
Okay.
because technically, we'd already be done before now.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So we wouldn't even be sitting here.
Goodness.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so back to
Yeah,
Fred's.
there's a motion and a second still, right?
Yeah, so discussed, okay, in favour.
Aye.
Indifferent?
Oh,
I mean,
Well,
because
There you go.
Because
Yeah, that's the other
I would be fine, just to Jen's point, I'd be fine if I circulate this and we meet one more time to make sure everyone's good, get comments and send. I also would be fine if people want me to circulate and then have people take a look,
Do we
send
see
comments
it?
back to me directly.
Directly.
Yeah.
You cannot
And then,
reply
Yeah,
all
right,
if you have a
right,
comment.
yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Because it's so
That's
easy to
fine.
do
Then
that you forget,
Then
so.
that's an amendment to the
yeah,
motion.
right,
yes, I would amend that people submit any comments
comments,
directly to me alone, and then I will take all of those,
and
incorporate,
And
resend.
resubmit it
Right.
to them.
Is there any way, like, if things were coming back that were items that were worth discussion, or like people had conflicting comments, would there be a way to basically call another meeting to
Yeah,
find
Yeah, you
out?
then
can
we'd
do
have to have
that.
another.
Yeah.
You can
yeah,
call
yeah.
a meeting.
yeah,
And you know, we
Yeah.
don't have to have a 3.5-hour meeting. I mean, if
No.
we
Right,
just
I
want to
think it
go
would be
over
like
5 points and go,
15-minute
okay, we're
meeting.
good,
Right.
then that's all we need. So,
Yeah,
you know, there isn't a time lot for it.
It's not,
She suggested an amendment, if I can get it out of my tongue.
okay.
She needs a second.
Second,
okay.
Leave it with it, yeah.
All in favour?
No, that's okay.
Aye.
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 Done.
Now,
Should,
now you need to vote on the motion, which we haven't had because we didn't get a full motion
Oh.
because she made it.
Because I messed
We
it
only
up.
got 2 votes, that's not a,
Right,
if you want to,
So
all right, I'll
the
make a motion as amended.
Seconded.
all in favour?
Aye.
As we discussed.
Aye.
Good,
Move
thank
we
you.
adjourn.
oh,
So,
wait a minute.
What?
Should we,
Well, I don't get a second, so it's okay.
should we get on the selectmen's agenda? Because they only meet every 2 weeks. If we have this all squared away within.
When
a
did you
week.
say they meet? Is it this week?
20,
Next
Tuesday,
Tuesday, and
yeah.
the 2 Tuesdays after that, and 2 Tuesdays after that.
They were every other Tuesday.
every other
Yeah.
Tuesday, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So do we all
I'll-
need to be there, or do we
25th.
want, are we sending Robin as the chair,
Yeah,
as
I
the
like the way
representative?
we
Can't
all
be-
sat in front of them there
Oh, yeah,
last
there we
time.
go. I
That
think
worked
I'm-
out good.
Yeah.
25th,
They
right?
took notice.
I just have to check my husband's
I'm-
work schedule.
I'm in the UK then, so
Oh,
I,
That would be why we were dancing around this meeting.
yeah, I'm happy that you will go along, or whoever's can,
Well, then
in the event,
perhaps what we want to do is send the thing,
before,
the amendment, I mean, the whole
Yeah.
layout, the proposal to the board,
so it
And
gets on
then-
there.
and then when you actually send it, say if, you know, to let us know if they wish us to attend a meeting to hear from the members
just
themselves.
send it as a letter to the selectmen,
Yeah.
so they read it during their correspondence
We could do that.
part
too.
of it, rather than getting on the agenda with the,
And you send us a letter saying, do you, if you want us to be
Yeah, I'll
present,
include that,
the,
yeah.
let us know which,
what
or
date would be
what
good.
date is good to put it on there.
Let's get the show on the road.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Because that means she needs to get her stuff done, so don't,
Yeah.
take that into account.
yeah, I'll be able to, because I need to, I haven't seen Henry too much over the last few weeks, so I think I can promise to send it on Tuesday, the 18th, to everyone to review.
okay.
And then, once I've heard back from everyone, saying like comments or not, then I can send it out basically this week.
You're not busy. Sure, you've got a lot going on with work
Which would, if they wanted to have it on the agenda, I don't know what's on their agenda, it would allow them to cover it on the 26th.
And then it's just a case if they want us all to come in, or if they want us to have a meeting and they want to come speak, attend it, whichever way they want to do it, we can then deal with that. So,
Yeah, when I send out the list, I'll send the letter too. Like, I'll basically include everything, like the plan, what we'll plan to say to the Board of Selectmen, the letter to them, with this as an appendix or appendix.
sounds good.
Okay.
Good, okay.
All
Are
right,
we-
guys.
Are we ready to
I'll
adjourn?
move to adjourn again.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favour of adjourning?
Aye.
Very good.
Three
Thank you very
thirty.
much.
We